Assalamu alaikum, this is Aisha. In today's speaking lesson, we are going to talk about telling stories, how you tell a story. I hope it's going to be fun. Let's start. David Slagle once said, "It's not enough to have a great story. You have to tell it well. It's not the story itself that is interesting, it's how you tell it." Now, here are some tips that can help you be a very good storyteller. First of all, your story should be kind of short. Don't make it too long. Don't make it too boring. Remember that people are there to listen. It's not a book that they are reading. They can put away for a while and come back, read again. They are sitting there listening to you. They have some other business to do. So keep it short. Number 2, try to use sequencing and linking words. What are these? Let's see. Sequencing words are the words that show chronological sequence, the order in which things happen. Examples for these words include, first of all. For example, you say, first of all, I packed my suitcase. Secondly, I made sure I had all my documents. Previously or before that, I changed some money. Then, I called a taxi for the airport. Later on, when we were stuck in traffic, I realized, but before all, I had double-checked my reservation. Finally, I arrived at the wrong check-in table or desk at the wrong airport for a flight that didn't go until the next day. Now, what do I mean by linking words? These words actually link the ideas in your story. They can be used to show reason, as in, I booked a flight because, to show result. As a result, I was late, to show contrasting information. Although I had a reservation, I hadn't checked the airport name. To show additional information. I made sure I had an up-to-date passport and I also took along my driving license. They can be used also to summarize. In short, I had made a complete mess of the holiday. More tips for storytelling include, try to keep it grammatically simple so that it is easy to follow. In general, we use past forms. You may use past simple if you tell your story in a chronological order, as in this example. First, I double-checked my reservation. Next, I packed my suitcase. And then I called a taxi. So, very simply, use past simple. You may use past continuous to describe either activities in progress at the time of your story or to describe the background in your story. Check this example. The sun was shining and it was a beautiful day. We were driving along the highway quite steadily until we suddenly saw in front of us the warning lights to slow down. We were heading towards a huge traffic jam. So, in this case, you need past continuous. You may also use past perfect, either simple or continuous, to add more interest to your story by talking about events that happened before the events in your story. Check this example. I double-checked my reservation, which I had made 3 days previously. This is simple past perfect. Another example. I wanted to visit some friends who had been living in France for the last 5 years. So we have here continuous past perfect. Vocabulary. Try to use a wide range of words to make your story more interesting. Remember that you can exaggerate things. So instead of just saying nice, you can say beautiful, fabulous, amazing, wonderful. Or instead of just saying bad, you may say horrible, terrible, awful, disastrous. So it gives more action to your story. Finally, remember that you are telling a story, not giving a lecture. So, look at the people listening. Keep eye contact with your audience. Use the right intonation, that is the ups and downs in your voice. Tell the story with expression in your voice. Try to make face expressive. Use body language, use body movement as you tell the story. Make sure that everyone is comfortable, because if they are not going to follow your story. Make sure that everyone can hear you properly. If they miss any part of the story, of course, they will not get it. Try to involve them in the story. You may ask them questions. You may ask them to do something, some task, maybe drawing something. Make it as interesting for your audience as possible. And finally, relax. You are having fun. You are trying to make the listeners have fun, so try to be relaxed. Now, what are the elements of story you are going to tell? When you tell a story, remember that you have, first of all, introduction, in which you may mention the people in the story, for example. Or you may mention the setting, when and where the story happened. You also need in the story characters. Who are the people in the story? Of course, that includes the hero, whether one or a group of people, and other people in the story related to the story. You need also main events, what happened in the story. And finally, you need an end for your story. Of course, it can be comedy or tragedy or a moral or a lesson. Now, let's see this example about an introduction into a story. Let's read together. I still remember how brave and courageous Ahmed was last summer in our school's camping trip. He was a real hero. He proved that no matter how physically weak you may be, as long as you have a brave heart. Notice here that in this introduction, you mentioned the hero, that is Ahmed. You mentioned the setting, that is time, last summer, and place, that is camping trip. Here is another introduction. All our family members thought I was coward and afraid of approaching dangerous situations. That was all because I was afraid of insects. I felt upset about that attitude towards me. I was not coward at all. Luckily, on an unforgettable day, I had the chance to make them change their attitudes and believe that I was a real hero. So again, here you have the hero, that is the speaker, and also one day. It's not clear right here. Maybe later on the writer will make it clearer. The conclusion: just as there are many smooth ways to enter a story, there are also smoother ways to exit your story. You can't just announce, by the way, that's the end of the story. That's not possible. Instead, try to pause, or change of the tone, or shift in body language or speaking rate. All these things signal the end of your story without saying anything. Now we have this exercise. I'm going to read a story. Try to read it with me and listen carefully, because after that you are going to change the ending of this story, or you may retell the story using your own words. You may record it and give it to a teacher to check it for you, just as an exercise. Let's read. The title of the story is Fire. It was a lovely sunny Friday. I was playing in our garden with my friends. We did not realize that it was going to be an unforgettable day in my life. Not far from our house lived an old man with his old wife. He used to enjoy himself and kill time by taking care of his garden. Obviously, that day, some weird idea occurred to him. It was to burn the weeds inside his garden. When we first saw the smoke, we ran to his house, but we could see him standing next to a big barrel with some fire inside. We went back home and continued playing, as we felt secured that he was watching the fire. Few minutes later, we heard a loud scream coming from that same house. The cloud of smoke was bigger. We ran to that house, but we could not get any closer. There was a huge fire in the garden. Very quickly, I went back home, called 997, then informed my parents. All the neighborhood gathered there, but they could do nothing. The fire was as enormous as an angry dragon. The old woman was still screaming from one of the windows of the house. Suddenly, like a lightning, my father, covering himself with a blanket soaked with water, ran inside. I was so worried about him. What if the fire caught him? What if the smoke stopped him breathing? Thousands of dark thoughts came to me. But just then, I saw him coming out, accompanied by the two old couple under his blanket. I started crying out of joy. My father was a real hero. Lovely story. So again, try to change the ending of the story. You can make it funny, or you can make it tragic. It's up to you. Or try to retell the story using your own words, record it and give it to your teacher so he will check it. There are some other tasks that can be given to the listeners based on retelling a story. For example, you can ask the listeners to think of or create an end of a story. That is called creative retelling, or retelling a story shifting from first person to second or third person singular. Retelling a story using a series of pictures. So you give the audience some pictures and they try to tell the story using these pictures. Changing the story into an interview with the characters of the story. Interacting with the characters of the story, which is another creative way of retelling a story. So one of them will be one character of the story, and the audience will try to ask him questions and interview him. That is all for today's lesson, but before you leave, try to remember these points. Keep the story short. Use sequencing and linking words. Use past forms for the verbs. Keep eye contact with your audience. Use exaggerated expressions. Use body language. Change in the tone of your voice, ups and downs. Involve your audience. Close the story using a close ending, an interesting ending. And that's the end of our video. I hope you enjoyed our lesson today. Wish you all the best. Goodbye.